Okay, can you hear us now? You can hear? Hey everybody, can you still hear us? Oh, that's a yes. Okay. All right, everyone. I am so sorry about that. We're having some technical difficulties. Okay.
You didn't hear anything I said. It's okay.
Nice little dry run. Okay. Well, sorry about that. Hey everybody. So apologies for the half hour of technical difficulties. We're back now live with Violet King, who's going to be kicking us off on growing herbs for medicine. Violet is going to say a little bit more about herself. And for some of you that don't know me, I'm the farm director here at the Ark Farm and the 11th Street Bridge Park plots. We do educational programming. We have a CSA for the community. And we also grow a lot of food here on the acre farm at the Ark and also at 5 community gardens throughout Ward 7 and Ward 8. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Violet. Again, apologies everybody for the technical difficulties and enjoy the class. Sorry.
It's okay. All right. Hey, y'all. You can hear me now? Just going to start again. So I apologize. I was looking at the PowerPoint and not at the chat box. So I didn't see everybody saying that they couldn't hear. So again, this is Growing Herbs for Medicine. We are going to be talking about how to grow herbs in your own home and use that to make your own medicine at home. So you can grow, harvest, and dry herbs at home to create your own home apothecary. This is a picture of the shelf in my kitchen that has a bunch of dried herbs and tinctures on it that I use. And so this is just to give you all an example of what you can do at home with the herbs that you grow. If you have any questions, please feel free to just type them in the chat box. I'll go back occasionally to look at them and answer them as best as I can. And so my name is Violet, or Vivi, and I'm a farmer / herbalist here in the DMV area. And I've been growing food for the past 7 or so years and have been working as an herbalist teacher for the past 4 years or so. And so I actually got my start with herbs right here at the Ark. I used to work here, and it was around 2015, I think, and we had a small medicinal herb patch on the farm. And I walked by it all the time, but I didn't know what was growing in there. And so part of my job was to invite different teachers here to teach classes. And so I asked the local herbalist to come and do a plant walk. And we literally spent 2 hours standing right in front of that medicinal herb patch. And it just completely opened my mind up to herbs and what you can do with them. And it was really exciting. And so after that, I enrolled in a course with Wild Herbal Ginger Center, which is a really great herbalism center here in the DMV. Right now, they're doing amazing online classes. And, you know, normally during the non-COVID years, they do a lot of in-person workshops as well as the Chesapeake Herb Gathering. And so I learned a lot from taking that class. It was a few months. And while I was taking that class, I learned that I really wanted to grow the herbs. You know, a lot of people in the class, maybe they were enrolled in other programs to become clinical herbalists. They wanted to see clients, or they wanted to make medicine for themselves or for their family. But what I realized was that I really wanted to grow herbs. And so I've kind of been on that path since I took that class, and really, teaching myself and learning how to grow plants and then to share that knowledge with other people. And so today, the first part of the class is going to be about, growing your own herbs, assessing the site that you have, figuring out what works best for you. And then we're going to get into some medicine making and tips for how to use these herbs once you are done growing them. And so a big part of herbalism for me is being able to connect with ancestors. I was adopted, and so I have kind of a break in my understanding of my lineage, but I've really felt that by working with herbs and working with plants, I've been able to reconnect to my ancestral heritage through the work that I do with herbs. Our ancestors have a really rich and deep history of working with plants, and I think it's a main reason as to why we are all still here today. They used herbs to keep them alive on the plantation and for years afterwards. And there's kind of been somewhat of a break in that knowledge, but a lot of people are reclaiming that knowledge. So this is a book that I would recommend, Working Cures. And there are a host of other books that talk about, the way that African American people have used herbs and interacted with herbs. All right, so we're going to get into assessing your site. And so there are a few questions that you want to ask yourself when you're starting herbs at home. Where do you live? Are you in an apartment, in a house, in a condo? Do you have a lot of space? Do you have a little bit of space? Do you only have a porch or a windowsill? It's fine, whatever you have. You can grow herbs at any scale at home and use them. And yeah, what type of growing space do you have access to? Do you have a front yard? Do you have a backyard? Are you in a community garden? Do you maybe work on a farm? Again, no matter the growing space, you can grow herbs at home. And one of the biggest things that you need is just a sunny place to grow in. And so here's a list of all the places that you can grow your own herbs. On a windowsill or porch, in your front yard, in your backyard, whether it's in raised beds or in the ground. DC has a lot of community raised beds and gardens. And so if you have that where you live, you could grow it in your community raised bed, or you can grow on farm. I'm a farmer here in DC and manage a farm called the Farm at Kelly Miller in Northeast DC for an organization called Dreaming Out Loud. And so we have about 2 acres where we grow fruit and vegetables. And then we also have a lot of herbs kind of sprinkled in there as well. And so I'll show you some examples of that throughout the presentation. But again, you want to make sure you have a sunny location, that it's south facing. If you're doing it at home, you want to make sure it's close to your house. You don't want to have to, walk really far to tend to your herbs. You want to make sure the soil is well drained, that you have access to water, and that you can also plant your herbs with your veggies and flowers. Herbs are really great for human beings, but they're also great for everybody else. And so some herbs help to detract pests or keep pests away from your precious fruits and vegetables, or they act as food for beneficial pollinators that you need in your garden, or medicine for the other creatures that you may have. I have chickens at home, and I put fresh herbs in their water and dried herbs in their food. And so herbs can be used in many, many ways at home in your homestead. So prepping your growing space. So the first way that you grow herbs is through raised beds. Raised beds are really great if you live in an urban space and you are unsure about the quality of your soil, or if you're unsure if there are contaminants in your soil. And so a raised bed is a way that you can grow stuff and not have to worry about any lead or anything like that. I mean, it's pretty simple to make. I've seen so many people this year starting gardens and starting their own raised beds at home. It can be whatever size works for you and fits. And it's pretty simple to put them together. So that is a way, one of the ways. If you maybe have a smaller growing space, a porch or some stairs, you can grow them in garden boxes or containers. I have a few friends that I gave, plants out to this year, and they're just growing them in containers at home, and they're thriving and they're doing great, and they can harvest them and use them. And so, you can use any type of container to grow your plants in. Another way is in your windowsill. Maybe you don't have a porch, but you have a nice south-facing window. You can use these little garden boxes or other types of, creative containers to grow herbs at home. You just want to make sure that if you're using something that isn't traditionally made for growing, that you poke holes in the bottom and put something underneath to catch the water so that there's good drainage. And not a lot of mess, but you could grow sage, thyme, oregano, basil, lemongrass, sorrel, all these different things at home. And, we use those things a lot for culinary purposes, but they're also medicinal, and we'll get into that more. And then maybe you are a farmer and you grow vegetables, but you want to get into growing herbs. You could set up a small herb garden in your urban farm or rural farm, or you could grow to scale. As you can see in these pictures, it shows a variety. And so there's a lot of information out there, and I'll share some resources about some different books towards the end of the presentation that you can check out that can talk to you about growing to scale. And then the materials that you need. It's really simple to get started. You just need some garden soil or potting mix if you're going to be starting in raised beds. You definitely want compost. You want to pick out the size of containers that you want ahead of time. You want to decide what types of plants you want or seeds you want. You definitely need a watering can or hose, a trowel to plant your stuff, a hoe to kind of weed around your plants, and then clippers and pruners so that you can harvest and kind of care for your plants. And you can get these materials at Home Depot, Lowe's, Tractor Supply, your local garden supply store. Here in DC, Ginkgo Gardens is a really great garden supply store. They have really great quality plants. They're super friendly and helpful. You can order stuff online. I ordered a bunch of plants online at the beginning of the year, and they'll just wrap them up and ship them to your house. Johnny's Seeds is my go-to for fruit and vegetables for production, but they also have a lot of herb seeds, and they ship things really quickly. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange is in Virginia, and they have heirloom and open pollinated seeds. I ordered a lot of seeds from them this year as well. They're really, high quality. You can find those in your local grocery store, here at Mom's and at Yes Organic, and probably at Glut as well. You can find these types of seeds. And then, if you're connected to your local farmer or shop at a farmer's market, mainly at the beginning of the year, farmers will definitely have all of these different types of seedlings that you can buy from them and plant, and probably point you in the direction of where to get more. I order seedlings from a place called Sharp's Farm here in Maryland, and they have fruits and vegetables, but they have a wide selection of herbs as well. All right, so picking your plants, what can you grow at home? So this is just a list that I put together for what I find could do well in containers and raised beds, and what can do well in your front yard or backyard. And it's mainly based on the space that you need. So lavender, lemongrass, sage, thyme, oregano, chives, mint, cilantro, parsley, and holy basil are all things that you can definitely grow in small containers and in raised beds. These are plants that you're harvesting, more so for their leaves or their flowers and not their roots. So you don't necessarily need all of that space for them to grow roots, which you'll harvest later. These things can also be grown in the ground as well. But if you have limited space, these are plants that do well in containers, and you can also bring them inside, when it gets cold, and grow them year round. A majority of the things on this list are perennial herbs. And then if you have more space, you could grow elderberry, yarrow, comfrey, echinacea, St. John's wort, mullein, mugwort, calendula, borage, red raspberry, elecampane, motherwort, nettles, and lots of other things. And I pick these things for front or backyard just because they oftentimes can get pretty big and just need more space. Some of these things you'll be harvesting their root, like comfrey or echinacea or elecampane. So you want to make sure that they have the space that they need to grow, so that you can harvest them properly. If you have any questions, just feel free to type them in the chat, and I'll check them and answer them as well as I can. All right, so annual versus perennial. So most of the vegetables that we grow, tomatoes, cucumbers, beans, carrots, those are all annual. And annual means that you have to plant that thing every single year to get a harvest from it. Whereas perennial is something that you mainly only have to plant once. And if you take good care of that plant, it will come back every year. And so an example of an annual herb would be basil. Basil is something that unfortunately you have to plant every year. Once the frost comes, it's done. It really likes warm weather. But lavender is a perennial herb. You can plant that one year and it will get bigger and bigger and bigger each year. And so you don't have to keep replanting it. A biennial means that it grows for 2 years and then its life cycle is done. And one of the herbs that grows abundantly here in the DMV area is mullein. Mullein is a biennial plant. And so in its first year, it grows pretty low to the ground. And then in second year, you can see in this picture, it shoots up and it has flowers. And then once it flowers and produces seeds, it will drop those seeds and more plants will spring up that next year, but they'll be in the first stage of their life cycle, which will be the low growing leafy stage. And so again, a majority of herbs that you work with are going to be perennial herbs. So we are going to get into transplanting. A transplant is an herb that has already grown that you can just plant right into the soil. These pictures are examples of the different plants that I ordered this year online and planted in my garden. So this first picture is golden seal. And then you can see it in the second picture. I transplanted it into kind of like a foresty area in my backyard. And it started to grow and produce leaves. This third picture is a bunch of plants that I ordered online. And they just came in the mail, and then I was able to plant them in my garden. And I don't have an updated picture, but they're enormous now. So transplanting is a really good way if you're getting started growing herbs. You just buy transplants. You don't have to worry about starting seeds or ordering seeds. And you can get them, through your local garden supply store, from your local farmer, or online through an herb retailer. This is just an example of a website that has medicinal herbs, so you can see that you can order these things online. They have nettles, golden seal, astragalus, black cohosh, and they'll just ship them right to your house and you can plant them. But if you are interested in starting stuff from seed, you're totally able to do so. You can start seeds in flats, in pots, recycled water bottles, or in containers, or right in the ground. So this is a picture of burdock that I started in the spring. I have a cold frame that it was in when it was colder. And so I started a few trays worth of those and then was able to transplant them into my garden. And so you can get seeds from places like True Love Seeds, Strictly Medicinal Seeds, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, Mountain Rose Herbs, or you can save your seeds and barter with other gardeners for them. And so it's pretty simple to start your own seedlings at home. You just need quality potting soil that drains well. And you just want to make sure that you read all the instructions on the back, that the temperature is right. And it just takes a lot of kind of patience and care and watching to make sure that everything is watered and stays moist, and that nothing is maybe trying to eat your plants. And then once they are a certain size, you can transplant them. And so these are pictures of the burdock that were in those flats that I showed you in the other slide. You can see they are much bigger in this picture. There's a root ball at the bottom. You can see the roots have formed. And so that lets me know that they're able to be transplanted. And so before you put them in the ground, if you are starting seeds in like the spring, you want to make sure that your plants get used to the outdoor temperatures before you plant them in the ground. And that just kind of finishes them off. And that's the same for vegetables as well. And then once they, you can see that they've kind of withstood that, you can plant them right into your garden. You can also propagate from plants. So these are pictures of elderberry. I have one elderberry plant on the farm that I work at. And so this spring, I decided that I would try and propagate to make more. And so in the spring, for an elderberry plant, little shoots kind of come up around the main base of the plant. And so you want to pluck those little plants up at the leaf node. You want to cut them at the leaf node. And so this is not elderberry, this is holy basil. I'm just using it to show you what the leaf node is. It's this point right here where the leaves shoot out. And so what you would do is you would just cut right there at the leaf node. You would pluck these leaves off. And then you could just stick this right into some potting soil. And it may take a while with this elderberry and with other things that I propagated this spring. Sometimes some of the leaves will get brown and they'll die. And what you need to do is just, pluck off those dead leaves and just kind of monitor the plant and make sure that it's getting enough water and care. And eventually it will kind of situate itself and it will start to grow strong and grow roots. These are some of the plants that I was able to give to other people this year. And once they transplanted them, they're growing big and strong and healthy. I use this DIY cold frame to start my transplants and for my herb propagation. And so that really helped me in the springtime. But if you were to do any of that now, it's warm enough where you wouldn't need to use a cold frame. So again, this is the leaf node right here. It's the kind of little bumps on the stem, and that's where more roots will grow from. And so you just want to make sure that you cut right underneath it so that the plant can root itself. You can propagate holy basil, mint, elderberry, things that are hardy and in the mint family propagate pretty well. All right. And so what you need to start your seeds, again, you need flats, small pots, potting soil, seeds, water, warmth, patience, and faith. Sometimes all your seeds may not germinate, or your plants will die, or your child will rip a seedling out. A host of things can happen. But if you have patience and faith, you'll be able to make it through and start growing your own herbs at home and be able to harvest them and use them. All right, so for harvesting, once you have established your herbs at home and you're ready to harvest them, there's kind of different rules around when to do so. And so you want to harvest herbs when they're at their peak. And so for roots, that means in the early spring or in the fall, when the plant has either is putting a lot of energy into the roots, or it doesn't have a lot of leaves anymore or flowers anymore, and is putting energy back into the roots in the fall. So things like echinacea or burdock or elecampane or maybe marshmallow are all things that you could harvest the root from. Dandelion as well, or yellow dock. Those are things that you can harvest for their roots. You want to harvest leaves, flowers, stems in late spring and summer once the plants have established themselves and are hardy and full of leaves. You want to harvest herbs on a dry, sunny day. You don't want to harvest them after a rain. If you are harvesting blossoms, you want to make sure that they're in full bloom. And so that would be calendula, chamomile, or elder flowers. Some herbs you want to start harvesting when they're in their early flowering stage. So a plant like St. John's wort, once it starts to flower a little bit, then you know it's time for you to start harvesting it, and you can use that to make tinctures or oils, or to just dry. And just depending on your need, you want to harvest a few leaves at a time or the whole plant. But if you are leaving the plant in the ground, you want to make sure that you leave at least a third of the plant, so that it can continue to photosynthesize and create more leaves. And you can harvest by hand, or using garden shears like this. I always carry around just a pocket knife. And so it's easy for me to just kind of cut the leaves off, the stems off the plant. And then you also want to make sure that you take some time to sit with the plant and to get to know it, and understand it. A big part of it is just kind of forming a relationship with the herbs. All right, so there's one question. It says, can I use the dandelions that grow around my house? If you don't spray anything on your lawn, you can absolutely use the dandelions that grow around your house. One thing for wild harvesting is that you just want to make sure that wherever you're getting stuff from is not sprayed, with any chemicals. But if it isn't, if you know that, or if it's your own yard and you know you don't use any chemicals on your lawn, then you absolutely can do so. And I can talk more about wild harvesting a little later. Actually, I'll start right now. So I love to harvest stuff in the wild. One of my favorite things to get from the wild is mullein. I have this mullein tincture right here that I made in June. And most likely these are leaves that I harvested from the wild. And so I find that once you notice what a plant looks like, then you'll see it everywhere. And so where I live, you can harvest mullein from the wild, mugwort. This year, for the first time, I saw elderberry out in the wild. Yarrow, there's all this yarrow that grows across the street from where I live. So a lot of these things are out in the wild, and you can harvest them. Again, you just want to make sure that you're not taking too much. You want to leave stuff for other people or for other animals. So just take what you need. And then you just want to make sure that there's no chemicals being sprayed when you do harvest from the wild. All right, drying. So once you are harvesting your herbs, you will dry them if you are going to be using them to make teas, maybe for tinctures, for oils, and other types of medicine. And so you want to make sure that your herbs are in a cool, dark place. You can use string to hang them. You can use baskets, racks, paper bags, boxes, or you can quickly dry them in a dehydrator. For years now, I've been using, just kind of the old school method of hang drying or drying on racks. But this year is the first year that I got a dehydrator, and that has worked really great. And I just kind of pick and choose, which herbs I want to hang to dry and which ones I want to use in the dehydrator. I've been drying a lot of red clover in the dehydrator, and that dries pretty quickly. And then other herbs like yarrow, like this, I'll just hang this to dry. And so if you were to do that, I like to have maybe 4 to 6 stems in my bundle. You can use a rubber band or string, and then you just want to hang it upside down like you can see in the picture. When I first started out, I would, hang stuff and put it in a paper bag and maybe put it in my closet or in a shed and dry it that way. You know that space is cool and it's dry and it's not exposed to light. And so there's many ways to dry your herbs. You could also lay them flat on a screen. You just want to make sure that they're not piled on top of each other. And then if you can, or if you have the space, you want to have a fan that's blowing air to keep it from being too moist and just to circulate the air. And herbs, for the most part, like pretty warm temperatures to dry in. So right now I have a drying shed at home where I dry things in multiple ways, and I have a fan that's going on in there, a majority of the day to keep the air flowing and circulating. Another question was, what brand dehydrator do you use? Somebody gifted me a dehydrator, so I didn't, do the research to find one myself. But there are a lot of, if you go online, there's a lot of reviews for the dehydrators, and it just kind of depends on the size and the scale that you need. The one that I have is round, and I like it. It shows you the temperature and how many hours, and it's kind of clear, and so it works pretty well for what I'm working on. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few herbs that you can grow at home. The first one is aloe. That's something that you could grow inside your house. And aloe is a really great herb to have, in your home medicine kit because it's really great for your skin. So I used to live in Aruba, and there were aloe plants everywhere, and people would come and visit and get badly burned by the sun. And we would just tell them to go outside, take an aloe leaf, cut it up, and put it on their sunburn, and it would really help. You can also use aloe in your hair. You can cut the leaf and take the gel out and just put it in your hair. I've done that for myself and for my kids as well. And you can grow it at home in a pot. Most garden stores have aloe available. And I also put it on this list because it's a plant that originated in Africa. And I think it's important to make sure that we talk about these plants and the journey of these plants and the way that our ancestors have used them. Aloe is cooling and moistening, which means it's really good for your stomach. So I also will drink the aloe juice. I haven't made it myself, but I have bought it and used it. And it just works really well, especially in the summertime, because it's really cooling. Hey, John. I could do an herbal first aid class. All right, mullein. So this is what I was talking about you can wildcraft mullein. It grows abundantly in the DMV, especially this year with COVID and all the issues with lungs. I've just seen this growing everywhere. And so I really feel that the earth provides us, with the things that we need. Mullein is also cooling and moistening, and you want to use it for respiratory issues, so it will soothe and hydrate your lungs. You can use it for chronic lung problems like asthma. You can make a tea from the leaf. You can make a tincture. You can make a glycerite. And then the flowers, the little yellow flowers that you see, are also traditionally used for earaches. And so those flowers will be infused in oil, maybe with garlic or with St. John's wort flowers. You can make your own infused oil at home and use that. And I found that I bought eardrops at the store maybe a few years ago, and when I looked on the back on the label, mullein flowers were in it. So these are things that are used, widely and known widely for being good for this. And then you can also use mullein in smoke blends. It sometimes can be a little bit irritating because of the little hairs on it, but it is something that's used in smoke blends. And in African traditional medicine, plants are thought to be effective at treating ailments in parts of the body that they resemble. And so mullein, it looks like your lungs, like the leaves are just big and they're really soft and nice. The same with elecampane leaves. Those leaves just look like lungs to me. And so you can use that to help you to kind of figure out what they're good for. Another plant that's on the list is okra. People may not always think of it as an herb, but it definitely is. It's also cooling and moistening and nourishing, and it's full of vitamins. So you can harvest the pods and make okra water. You can just eat it. You can put it in your food. And then I took an herbalism class last fall, and the teacher was from Africa, and she talked about how they use the leaves and the root there. And I thought that was really fascinating because I haven't heard about that here. So you can use the leaves, the root, and the fruit in okra. And this is another kind of treasured plant that came over with us that you can grow in your garden. And it can be used to feed you and to nourish and heal you. Poke. So poke is something that's native to this area. And so I wanted to put it on the list because you've probably seen it around, but maybe you don't know what it is. It's something that is considered toxic. And so I'll never tell anybody to ingest it. You can do kind of your own research on it, but it is something that, traditionally African people and Native people have used in their healing. And so you can use the leaves, the roots, and the berries. In the spring, people will make poke salad with the baby leaves. And then in the fall, you can harvest the root and maybe make a tincture from it. And so this is something that grows all around and should definitely be used with caution, but I think it's an important thing to have an understanding of. Okay, purple cone flower or echinacea. So echinacea is something that probably most people know about. Unfortunately, it is something that's over harvested. And so personally, when I grow echinacea, I grow it to, for pollinators and to help kind of reestablish it in the environment. I don't harvest it personally, but that's not to say that you can't. It's just that traditionally it's over harvested. And so you want to be mindful of those things when you're either out harvesting stuff in the wild or growing stuff. Sometimes it's better for us to plant these things and just have them be and provide them for other people and not necessarily take them for ourselves. But echinacea is a powerful, powerful plant. Use the roots mostly, the seeds and the leaves, and there are different varieties of them that are used for different things. So yarrow, yarrow is one of my favorite plants. I was introduced to it here at the Ark, and it's one of the first things that I started to use for myself. And so it has these beautiful flowers. And so you want to harvest yarrow after a drought. The medicine is supposed to be the most potent after a drought. The flowers will dry up a little bit, and then they won't be as flimsy as they are, when they have a lot of water. And I love yarrow for when I have a cold or the flu. I just find that it kind of just heats my body up. Maybe it will make me sweat, help me move through a fever. And I'll combine it with sage and with chamomile. It's definitely my go-to herb for the fall. All right, and then elder. So elderberry and elderflower are also things that people use a lot of. I didn't realize it until this year, but elder grows all around in the wild, which I thought was so amazing. And for me, I wasn't able to recognize it until the one that I have on my farm started to flower. And I saw what the flowers looked like because it's in its 3rd year. It takes a while before it produces any flowers. And so then when I was driving home and I'd be looking, along the highway or in my neighborhood, I started to notice that elder was growing all around me, which is so exciting. And so I sometimes sneak out of the car, cut some flowers, and go home and dry them. They dry in about 2 or 3 days. And so that's a way that you can kind of wild harvest and use these things at home. So I'm keeping my eye out for the berries. I didn't want to take all of the flowers from the patch that I found because I wanted to give the plant an opportunity to produce berries that I'll go back and look for. But elder and elderflower, elderberries is definitely something you want to have in your medicine cabinet. Sage. Sage is another great herb to have at home. As I mentioned before, I'll combine it with yarrow and chamomile. Sage is really good for your throat, for sore throats. You can make a gargle from it. As a warning, if you're a nursing mother, you don't want to use sage because it will dry up your breast milk. It does have a really strong taste, so you don't have to use a lot of it. But I just find it's a really great herb to use in the winter time. And then my other favorite plant of all time is holy basil. Holy basil is one of the first plants that I was introduced to in the medicinal herb garden here at the Ark. It has the most amazing smell. It's considered a sacred plant in India. People plant it, in front of their doors. And it's an adaptogen. It helps your body adapt to stress. And so I had made a tincture from holy basil last summer that I just had sitting in my cabinet. And so when COVID started, I was like, oh, that's what I need. So I strained it and I bottled it up. And I just felt so stressed, in March when everything was first happening. And so I would take a little bit of that tincture and it kind of just dissipated all the kind of like knots and anxiety that I felt in my stomach. And so holy basil is great for tinctures. I really like to make fresh tinctures from it, but you could do fresh and dry. The tea is also amazing. It pairs really well with rose. When I first started using holy basil, I would put it with rose a lot. It's a really great combination. Holy basil is something that is an annual. So because of our temperature here, it doesn't come back every year, but it has an abundance of seeds. And so if you plant it and maybe you forget to save the seeds, guarantee it will grow where you planted it the year before, again, the next year. I have volunteer holy basil growing all over my farm. I planted a few this year in a specific place, and the ones that are popping up are far away from where I planted the ones this year. So I love this plant and really recommend it as something to have in your garden. And that's the plant I'm going to use today as an example for our tincture that we're going to make. So we're going to get into making herbal products. So you can make lots of herbal products at home. You can make tinctures, salves, glycerites, teas, steams, balms, oils, and more, which is really exciting. So plants that are growing in the gardens or farms that I manage. So there's echinacea, marshmallow, and mint. For mint makes a really amazing tea. So I'll harvest the leaves and dry them and make tea from them. It adds just a great flavor to your teas. If the other herbs that you're using may not have the best flavor, the mint will really help that. It's really good just for like your sinuses, for your stomach. And so I mainly use mint in tea. Echinacea, again, I use the root of echinacea and I will make a decoction with the root and other roots. And so a decoction is when you put herbs in water and you boil that water on the stove. So things like bark and seeds and roots are not going to be able to release all of their kind of essential oils if you just pour boiling water over them. You're going to need to boil them so that they can really get that out. I'll also do that with elecampane, with hawthorn, with milk thistle. You can also use a mortar and pestle to kind of grind those herbs up before you decoct them. And I've done a lot of that this year and used those herbs in a decoction, and it works really well. The kind of steam will fill up your house. So if it's lung herbs like elecampane, you can kind of breathe that in, and then you can drink it as well. And it's really helpful. These are other herbs that are in my garden this year: motherwort, mullein, and St. John's wort. Motherwort has a strong taste, and so I've been making tinctures out of motherwort with the fresh leaves. So this is an example of a small one that I did. Once the plant started to flower, I just cut off a few of the leaves, and I had just a little bit of alcohol left, which is why it's so small. And I made this small tincture. So I made this about a month ago. And so when you're making tinctures, you want to make sure it's sitting in a cool place with limited light for at least a month. And I'll just go in and kind of shake it up, every day or every few days. And I'll put all my tinctures together so that I can just go through all of them and just monitor them. And then, soon, maybe even today, I'll show you all how to strain this and bottle it up. Mullein, I use the mullein leaves dried. And so to dry them, I don't have an example of the leaves, but you can see they can get really, really big. I found mullein leaves while harvesting this year that are about this big. And so what I like to do is roll them up really small and then cut them with scissors and then lay those out to dry. I have a mesh screen dryer that I also use at home. And so I'll put those leaves there and making sure that they have, good air circulation and good airflow, and they dry pretty quickly. And then you can use those, for tinctures or smoke blends or in teas. And then St. John's wort, which is the last picture, is something that you typically want to use fresh. With St. John's wort, it's good quality if the oil or the tincture that you're making turns red pretty quickly. So you want to make sure that you have that red color. And that's the same with drying it. You can dry it pretty easily. You could hang it to dry or lay it flat to dry. I've done both. And again, you just want to make sure that it has that red color. And that's the same if you're, purchasing any of these from another person. You just want to make sure that it has that red color, because then it's good quality. And so these are just some examples of things that I've made at home this year. The top is a infused oil. And so I like to make infused oils in my crock pot. And so what I'll do is I'll dry the herbs first, decide which ones I want to use, decide which oil I want to use. And then I'll put all the herbs into the crock pot and pour oil over it just slightly so that it covers the herbs, but not all the way, as you can see here. And then I'll turn the crock pot on, and I'll probably have it cooking for at least 8 hours. And then once it's done, once all of the essential oils have come out, then I'll strain it and bottle it and either use that as an oil, for hair or body, or you can make a salve with that infused oil. The picture underneath it is an example of a decoction. You can see that there's hawthorn berries, there's red clover in there, there's probably burdock root in there. And so that is an easy thing that you can do at home to drink this as a tea. I also like to make smudge sticks or burn sticks from herbs. I find that mugwort, lavender, and rosemary make really great burn sticks. And so I make sure that I do that every year. And so that I have them throughout the winter time and throughout the rest of the year, and I can burn them at home. Underneath that is an example of a tincture. So that's an oregano tincture that I made. I like to make oregano tinctures both with fresh herbs and dried herbs. There's definitely a difference in taste, but I like to experiment and see what my body likes more. And so I made a really, really big jar of oregano tincture. Oregano is antiviral. You may have had oregano oil. So this is just my version of that. And I've been using that throughout the year. I've been working, throughout this whole year. And so anytime I'm home from work, or if I go to the store, or if I feel like I'm around people, I'll make sure to take the oregano tincture just to kind of boost my immune system. This other picture at the top is just an example of a tea blend that I've made. And so once you've dried your own herbs, you can process them and make your own tea blends. And so a way to do so is if you have a colander, you could pull your dry herbs kind of through the holes of the colander, and all of the leaves, the flowers will come off. And that is one way that you can process them. You can also do it by hand with gloves on, or with scissors, which is what I would do with yarrow. If I had yarrow, I would just kind of cut these leaves off, these flowers off, and kind of pull these leaves off and process them that way. And then this last picture at the bottom is a glycerite. And so this is my first year making glycerites. Normally I just make alcohol-based tinctures, but I'm working on a herbal mutual aid project with another herbalist in DC, and we decided that we would make non-alcoholic medicine. And so this is mullein and nettles. And so in this picture, the method that I used for this one was I added a little bit of water to it, and then probably did half the jar dried herbs, and then poured the glycerin over it. And then I just let it sit in my cabinet for a month before we strained it and processed it. Another way that you can make a glycerite, which I really like, that I just started doing, is by putting it in a crock pot. And so you could do the same thing. You would want to boil some hot water and fill up your jar maybe a third of the way or half of the way with your dried herb. You pour a little bit of that boiling water over the herb to release some of those oils. And then you put the glycerin in and fill it all the way to the top. And then you want to put it in your crock pot with a towel at the bottom of the crock pot, and sit that jar on the towel, and then fill the jar up with water up to kind of like the shoulder of the jar. And then you just turn your crock pot on low and let it sit for about 3 days. I make sure that I monitor it because the water will go down. And so every morning or every evening I'll go and I'll check and I'll pour more water. But that's a really quick way for you to make a glycerite at home. They're great because you can use them for kids. And so it's something that I'm just now getting into, but it's really exciting. You can use aromatic herbs, lavender, chamomile, motherwort, passion flower, nettles. What's another one? You could probably do yarrow or holy basil. Vegetable glycerin is really, really sweet. And so if herbs are bad tasting, it's a good way to be able to kind of mask that taste while getting the medicinal properties from it. And so these are just some resources that I wanted to share, of books that I have at home that I find really, really valuable. Working the Roots, over 400 years of traditional African American healing is an amazing book. Both story has a storyline, and then it also has the ways in which the different herbs are used. So I definitely want that. You should definitely have that in your collection. This next book, Body into Balance, I picked that up at an herbalism conference in the fall. And it took me a while to check it out, but once I did, I love it. It's an amazing, amazing book. I highly recommend it. It's very easy and practical. And it's laid out very, very well. And then The Organic Medicinal Herb Farmer, that is a book that I look at all the time. The woman, Melanie Carpenter, I think her stepmom is Rosemary Gladstar. So she learned all this information from her mom and then started an herb farm with her husband. So it's, I think, one of a few kind of well-known herb farms. I'm pretty sure they're up in Vermont, but they just have really great information in that book about how to grow herbs to scale. So that's something that I use on a regular basis. And so now we're going to get into making a tincture. So hopefully everyone at home has their supplies with them. So I have a mason jar right here. I have some 80 proof vodka in this jar. And then I have some holy basil. And so I have fresh holy basil that I'm going to use. Again, you could use it fresh or dry. It's fine either way. And I like to use all of it. The stems, the roots, the flowers, everything. I think it makes a really great tea. So you could, I have these gloves. That I'll use. So you want to either kind of take the leaves off one by one like this, or you can just rip the stems up. Or you could use scissors to just cut the plant up. I don't know if y'all can see a little bit. So you can see I'm just cutting them up. I can smell all of the oils that are coming out of the plant. Here's some flowers. I'm just going to stick those right in there. I'm going to cut them up a little bit. But I like to put all of this in here. And so if you're using fresh plant material, you want to fill your jar all the way to the top. It has more water in the leaves, and so you want to use more of the herb. But if you're using something dry, you only have to fill your jar about half of the way. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to just put them in the chat box now. And I can go through and answer those for you. And I will fill this jar up. I don't have labels with me today, but I always make sure that I label my tincture. Usually, not on this one, but usually the common name with the Latin name, what I use, the date, and the type of vodka or type of menstruum that I use for it. You want to have all that information on there so that you know when it's done and when you can use it. So I just do hand labels at home. And then when I strain my herb, I make sure that I put the date that I started it as well as the date that I strained it, just so I have for my own records, you know, how long the herb was sitting. And it's very simple to make herbs. I think in the beginning, it felt really kind of scary and daunting to do this, but the more you do it, the more you realize that it's a pretty simple thing. These are all kind of wise woman traditions. You can definitely, you know, do things more in a more technical way. And if you're making herbal products, you know, for other people, you probably want to be more precise in the way that you do it. But if you're doing it at home for yourself or for your family, it's perfectly fine to use these kind of common ratios. So again, fresh material, you want to fill the jar all the way to the top. And if you're using dry material, you want to fill it about half of the way. And so I'm almost finished. Keep cutting these up. All right, so now my jar is full. And I have some alcohol in this jar. And so then all you do is pour it over. All of the herbs are submerged in the alcohol. And I put the top on. You could put cheesecloth underneath the cap as well if you wanted to. And then you just put the top on, shake it up, and you have your tincture. And so again, you just want to make sure you label it with the date, the name, the common name of the herb, the Latin name, the proof of vodka that you've used, and any other things. Like if I'm making something on a full moon or on a new moon, I may write that on the label so I know. And then I'll put, when I make the label for this, I'll put leaves, stems, and flowers so I know. Oh, so I'm using 80 proof vodka, and you can use higher proofs, but this is something that you'll find in, your local store. So I found you could use Tito's or Burnett's or any other type of 80 proof vodka. And that just helps to break things down. And so now I want to show you how to strain an herb. I have this mullein tincture right here. And so normally I would use cheesecloth, but I just picked this up and I think it's pretty cool. And so I've been using this to strain herbs. It's just a kind of a small strainer I picked up in North Carolina. And so normally if I was at home, I would probably put this into a bowl and then put this on top. And so this mullein tincture, I made this on June 21st. And so it's June 25th. So I know that it's been at least a month. I've been shaking it up, on a daily basis. And now I just have to open it. One of the questions was, what is cheesecloth used for on the jar? So it can be used to protect the herbs from the rubbing against the lid. And then you want to make sure that your tincture sits for at least a month. I've had some sit for a year, 6 months, maybe I've forgotten about it, but at least a month is a good rule of thumb. So you make sure that all the medicinal properties are infused. And so here's my mullein tincture. I'm pouring it in. Try and move the camera back a little bit. So you may be able to see it's this beautiful kind of rich brown color. And so you definitely want to do this into a jar if you can, to catch any of the liquid that might be coming out. If I were to use cheesecloth, I would use a rubber band and just secure the cheesecloth around the lid and just pour it in, but I really like using this strainer. I think it works pretty well. And then what I'll do is, because the herb will probably hold some of the liquid, I will go through and just squeeze all that liquid out. And with mullein, it's pretty easy to do it because mullein leaves are already really soft. Nice. And so I'll pour more of it out and just squeeze more of it. Try and get all that liquid. And so another kind of exciting thing is when you're finished, you get to see all the different colors that your tinctures turn out to be. And so this mullein is this dark, dark color. Oh, the holy basil tincture will probably be like a light brown color. The St. John's wort tincture will be reddish in color. What are the proportions to use? So another question is, what are the proportions to use for herbs and vodka? I don't think I have enough fresh herbs to fill the jar. So if you are using fresh herbs, you want to fill the jar all the way and then pour the vodka over it. If you don't think you have enough, like that's why I made one in this small jar, because I knew that I didn't have enough vodka, but I still wanted to make a tincture. And so you can see the difference in the size of these jars. So if you have different sizes at home, you don't necessarily have to use kind of the standard mason jar size. You can use a smaller one. And it's fine to also get more herbs or get more alcohol and add it in if you don't have enough right now. So I'm just pressing out all these oil out of here, all this liquid. And if you have compost at home, I would just throw all this probably into the compost. And do one more round. So you can see there's still kind of liquid at the bottom. And so this is probably the most time-consuming part of making tinctures. You can see it's pretty easy to make a tincture. And the work is really straining it out and then bottling it. So if you want to measure things out, you could also use a small scale like this one. For dried herbs, you can use 1 ounce of dry herb for every 5 ounces of liquid. So you would measure out 1 ounce of dry herb on your scale, and then for every ounce that you put into the jar, you would use 5 ounces of vodka. Almost done. And then once you're done, you can bottle your tincture up. I use these 2 ounce amber jars. to bottle my tinctures up. I've ordered them off of Amazon, off of Uline. So just depending on how many you need, you can find a good source, and they're pretty affordable. And then you want to keep your tinctures can keep for a while, but I would personally use it within the year because the quality of it will go down. All right, so we've strained most of it out. And so now you can see this is a beautiful mullein tincture, which I would label with the date that I started it, what it is, what was in it, and then the date that I strained it as well. And then, see if I can manage this. I have this little kind of thing that fits into the jar so that I can fill up my jars. And so if I was at home, again, I would have a bowl because it can get kind of messy. And some of it may come out, but then you can just pour your tincture into the jar. If you're doing a glycerite, you probably want to use like a measuring cup and pour it into the measuring cup, and then pour it into here because glycerite is pretty sticky. You could do that with this tincture as well. All right. And then I filled it up just a little too much. You can see now this is full. And then this came with a dropper. So I just put it in, make sure I don't fill it up too much so it doesn't overflow. And then I have a nice tincture that I can use at home. And I would label this as well so I know what it is. And that's how you strain out a tincture and make a tincture. So one of the questions is, what was the blanket of the herbalist class you mentioned in the beginning? I'm thinking blanket is probably another word. If the person, Krishan, if you want to just retype that question, I don't fully understand. Oh, the name. So the name of the herbalist class was Wild Ginger Herbal Center. So they're online. They have a lot of online classes. They're doing a whole online series this year. That's like a subscription series. So you can sign up and you have access to all these classes with herbalists from around, I think around the world are teaching classes there. So it's a really great resource. So that is what I have for y'all today. If folks have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat before I sign off. I do want to share with you just a really great book that I use and love called The Modern Herbal Dispensatory. This, you can see I use it a lot, and I would highly recommend getting this book if you can. Because it talks all about medicine making and goes, pretty in depth about how to craft different blends. And it has a really good glossary as well, and recipes for medicine. So another question is, with the tincture, how do you administer it? A few drops in tea or something else? Yeah, so you can do it. You want to do it kind of based on your body. And so you want to experiment with it. I would probably, do a dropper full like this into water, or just take it. And then you can see how your body reacts to it after a few days and decide, do I need more or do I need less? But it should be That's kind of the rule of thumb, is the dropper full, but you want to really do things based on your own body and what you need. Okay. So I'm just going to share my PowerPoint one more time, just to give you my social media handle, Cosmic Farmer. You can follow me on Instagram for more updates on classes or to see the work that I'm doing. Yes, we are recording this and it will be available on Facebook. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in. Hopefully you are able to make your own tincture at home and we're able to learn some valuable information. And also hopefully I'll be able to teach this class in person soon. I also want to let folks know who are in the DC area. I will be doing a pop-up apothecary at the farm at Kelly Miller, most likely the second week of August. Again, I'm working on an herbal mutual aid project with another herbalist. And so we have glycerites, steams, herbal teas, burn sticks, a host of things that we will be giving out to people for free through our herbal mutual aid project. And so we're also accepting donations. We've had a lot of herbalists and community gardens in the city donate herbs to us. So if you have herbs that you would like to donate, or if you'd like to participate in helping us make stuff and kind of learn stuff more hands-on, we'll be doing our next product making session on the farm on August 5th. And you can check out DOLDC on Instagram. We'll have more information about that opportunity. So the school is called Wild Ginger Herbal Center. And then I work for Dreaming Out Loud. And RG is DOLDC. And we'll have more information on our Instagram about how you can connect with us and help with the Herbal Mutual Aid Project if you're interested. So again, thanks for everyone for tuning in. Last call for any questions. You can drop them in the chat, and then we'll be finishing up for the day. All right, thanks, y'all.
Awesome. So, hey, everybody. Thank you all again so much for tuning in to our Making Medicinal Herbs with Violet King. Violet is awesome and a huge heavyweight in the farming and herbalism community in the DMV. And so we're really appreciative of her time. If you guys want to connect, anybody that signed up for our workshop online through the website, I will be sending all of Violet's information out to everybody so that you all can connect directly. I'll also be sharing email information with Violet so that she can let everybody know when all of her next amazing upcoming events are. We're going to try to get Violet back here again this fall for a follow-up herbalism course, so we'll make sure to let everybody know. Thank you all so much for bearing with us through the technical difficulties. I hope you all have a great and safe weekend. Take care, everybody. Thank you.